Good day. My name is Nonhle Mngadi. I am a social ecology technician at Ezemvelo KZN Wildlife. Basically, my work deals with conducting research that has to do with building relationships with different communities that are adjacent to Ezemvelo protected areas. So it's conducting research to build those relationships and to understand the communities better, to have a supportive relationship between different protected areas as Ezemvelo manage and the communities adjacent to them. So in this presentation, I will be presenting about the journey that we took in documenting case studies of protected areas using alternative livelihoods to reduce user pressure and enhance protected area management effectiveness. So the background of conducting this study, it was the need of addressing the different social issues or different social pressures that we are experiencing as an organization with the local communities that are adjacent to Ezemvelo protected areas. You would have been maybe be aware of the different challenges that we are experiencing with communities whereby we are requested to provide more jobs for communities. We saw this earlier on this year at Tiflufluwe Game Reserve in Polosi, and whereby there's illegal harvesting of natural resources or over harvesting of natural resources due to socioeconomic issues that communities are experiencing. So as a social ecology unit within Ezemvelo, we then troubled ourselves in trying to find out um, what are other protected areas around the world doing in trying to manage the issue of, of the pressure of using protected areas for communities around them. So we went on a journey. Okay, maybe I am skipping a bit. I'm meant to be in the background. So that's the background basically. So this work is meant to contribute towards effectively managing our protected areas. So it's the journey of understanding the use of alternative livelihoods to reduce pressure and enhance protected areas management effectiveness. So this research was done in mandate, for exploring and providing new knowledge to inform best conservation practice and building the relationship between local communities and Ezemvelo KZN Wildlife Protected Area. So in terms of the introduction of what led to the studies, the protected areas in general around the world are experiencing heavy, pressure from surrounding communities, from people, be it use of resources, be it providing employment, be it using protected areas for grazing. So then it becomes the management of protected areas then become ineffective, or not, or rather they don't perform to the standard of what protected areas should perform. So this study then is meant to look at alternative livelihoods in how we could use them to address some of the social economic issues that we have with the protected, rather with the communities that we have around us in the protected areas. So one would ask, why was it important? So you would know that one of the mandates of Ezemvelo KZN Wildlife is partnership, and that is building partnership, with local communities become one of the partners. So this work contributes largely to that mandate of partnership in trying to understand how can alternative livelihoods help us to reduce pressure, but also in the same time addressing the social economic issues that are experienced within the communities that are adjacent to Ezemvelo. So the aim of the study is to gather relevant information on livelihood alternative projects which have been implemented in other countries with the aim to reduce pressure on protected areas and examine the feasibility to test such approaches to Ezemvelo KZN Wildlife. The objective of the study is to research and gather information and using alternative livelihood projects to reduce pressure on protected area. Okay, so this was a desktop study where we had a certain official, research, go on the internet to research about the use of alternative livelihood, particularly looking at case studies where there has been implementation and then there has been reporting of after the implementation, what happened, so that we could get a picture of the use of alternative livelihoods before we even try, to go on a journey as an organization of using alternative livelihoods. So we call it a learning exchange. So it's gathering information to know better and to be in a better position to take decision because of how others who have walked the path have experienced it. So the study reviewed 15 protected areas that used alternative livelihood activities or methods as a tool to reduce pressure. So just to give a picture on the protected areas that we were able to find online, because this research was dependent on what we could access online, of the information that was populated online. So you find that most of the countries that went on a journey of implementing alternative livelihoods were mostly developing countries, countries that were in lower income economy, and then we couldn't find case studies of more developed areas that used this method. Funding processes, most of the funding that came out of implementing the alternative livelihood projects were from, it was grants, it was loan, it was donor money. So it was unlikely that the protected area would be the one to give funding to the suggested alternative livelihoods. They had to go and look outside to find that money to fund those alternative livelihoods to reduce pressure for those particular protected areas. So the pressure that was experienced by the different protected areas are common pressure that we are also experiencing, including human-wildlife conflicts, over exploitation of natural resources, overgrazing, which is one of our biggest issue right now as an organization, water pollution. I think we are experiencing this with the different mining that are taking place next to our protected areas, and then you find that it's only inside the protected areas now that we would have like fresh water and the demand becomes high. Challenges such as poverty, high unemployment. So the picture of the drivers from the different protected areas that we reviewed were very similar to the record of the pressures that Ezemvelo KZN Wildlife is currently experiencing. In fact, I could even generalize it as most of the protected areas are experiencing in South Africa. So the alternative livelihoods that were implemented from the reviewed 15 protected areas were many. So I'm just going to touch on few. And for time purposes, I'm not gonna dwell into them or go into details about them. So it included bakery, where you encourage communities to have their own bakery to sell within the community and outside. It included finding alternative grazing land, rather, for the community. So this was involving different stakeholders to come together and find alternative grazing land, even outside of the areas where the communities were. So, and then also there was for addressing the issue of wildlife-human conflict, there was a method of beehive fence that was used. We picked up a lot of, that same method throughout many or many protected areas. Also beekeeping, where you actually encourage the communities to do beekeeping. There was also many alternative livelihoods of encouraging communities to have different nurseries for plants, for flowers, for agriculture purposes. And then also some included dressmaking, rabbit farming, pig farming, you know, tour guide services. It differed as according to the interest of the different communities that, the protected areas were located in. So there's a variety of options, to choose from or to engage in trying to implement the alternative livelihoods. So findings from the search or from this research so included that there's a great need to involve communities. Without the involvement of communities, the success of the success of the project implemented were slim. So how projects improve community livelihoods? So they provided new skills, even in cases where a project failed, but there would still be a transfer of those skills for the initiating of those alternative livelihoods. For instance, community members gained financial management skills, investment skills, business management skills, and designing, of nurseries. Also, the implementation of alternative livelihoods came with reducing poverty, where there were jobs that were created, there was income from starting small businesses, there were opportunities that were, extended to the communities that benefited them economically. And then there was improvement of lifestyle. So in some areas, the implementation of alternative livelihoods contributed rather into providing clean water. There was facilitation of health services and education. There was sponsorships. To local learners. There was building of schools. There was renovation of schools. And then also there was improved access, whereby there was encouragement of kids to, or rather the focus for the youth to go inside protected areas to experience what was protected areas, so that they'll build that connection between communities and protected areas. There was also food security through the alternative use of gardens. So this directly reduce the reliant on natural resources, whereby if you have communities have their own gardens to have food, and then in return they don't have to use natural resources that could be getting depleted in the different protected areas. Okay, so looking at how the implementation of alternative livelihoods contributed to biodiversity conservation through the implementation of different environmental workshop, communities rather became more knowledgeable about the importance of biodiversity and using resources sustainably. But it was important to note that the behavior change was caused by consistent environmental education, workshop, not the tick box that we normally do, of maybe following a yearly environmental calendar, and that's when we go out. Consistently being there, engaging with people, it becomes a program that we are every day we are in an engagement of trying to work together with people, ensuring that there's biodiversity conservation, and in that way you see behavior change, because you are engaging people consistently on the journey of biodiversity conservation. Community were encouraged through projects to participate in activities that are environmentally friendly. So this is also when you identify the privilege of having a conservation agency be the one to drive alternative livelihoods for the communities, that you have a better stand in understanding if those recommended alternative livelihoods projects could affect the environment, and then contribute into advising against them, because the whole aim where we get conservation agencies to be the ones who participate in the journey of identifying alternative livelihoods is to be in those discussions, so we will be aware of the projects that are identified, that they will not in return come back and affect the environment. Okay, projects implemented also assisted in resolving issue of conflict between community and reserve staff. So this is a big one, especially also for Ezemvelo, carrying the history that we are carrying of how some of our protected areas were implemented, where people were forcibly removed. So the building of this relationship through coming to people as people who want to assist and want to build a relationship that is beneficial for both parties, you get the result of having good relations between staff and local communities. In this way, you also able to address many issues, such as maybe if there's illegal hunting, people then can be able to report stuff, because that working relationship is there. There's an understanding that working with that protected area is also beneficial to people as we come back and serve such methods to people. So just to highlight the challenges, because not everything was smooth, just to highlight the challenges of the implemented project, a lack of access to market to sell projects was also a challenge. So I think we can relate to this. We know that most of the protected areas are located in remote areas. So you will find the proposal of business to produce something, and then a market becomes, a challenge because of lack of access to, the wilder population. So this was also identified. So there's a need highlighted that if you are recommending any alternative livelihood projects to communities, you need to be aware how will you access your market for those, particularly if it's a business method alternative livelihood, how will you reach your market to ensure a flow, in your business plan. So lack of community participation, fewer people participated and other continued with hunting, poaching, because the project benefited a small portion of the community. This point also, when I was doing my analysis, when I came through it like I related to it so much, because in most times you find that the scale, because of financial restriction, the scale of the different projects that we can give out to communities become the scale doesn't become impactful, because a fewer number of people benefit from the different projects that we are able to deliver to communities. Would then people get discouraged, people don't want to participate. So this was also identified, as a challenge when implementing. So there's a need to aware ourselves if we want to implement alternative livelihoods of the scale. The scale needs to be impactful, where a lot of like a majority of people would come together and actually be of support. The scale mustn't be so small that it will not be felt, and then the people who are not benefiting could be able to overpower the people who are benefiting in trying to plan or implement alternative livelihoods. Natural disasters or floods led to people losing their crops before harvesting. I mean, this also very relatable here in KZN. We've seen how recently we were affected by floods. So this is then, there's also important to consider those natural disasters in when you are, identifying the relevant alternative livelihood methods or initiatives to be implemented. And then there was failure to adapt to change alternative livelihood methods that introduced gas stove to reduce demand of firewood did not have much of an impact because people continue using firewood. So this also speaks to, you know, understanding, the socioeconomic, factors when you are introducing a certain livelihood method to the community, because it's one thing to introduce people to use gas and give them gas stove, but it's another to maintain that, where there's these communities have high level of unemployment, and then where would you expect them to have money to refill the gas? So then, also, um, beyond that is, if people have had a history, or a legacy of using fire, maybe there's beliefs of it tastes better if it's cooked with wood. So it's all of those unpacking that you need to do. So you cannot just donate, but you need to be there and assisting people to the change, and adapting, to the new method that you would introduce. So another challenge was no monitoring of effectiveness of the project. So um, you would find that donor money has like a 3 year a 3 year time frame, and then after that, all of the people who were there in communities implementing the alternative livelihoods are gone, and now it's reliant on just the community, to go on with the program, which leads to, failure of program when there is no monitoring. For instance, an advantage then becomes for Ezemvelo, because we are situated in the communities that we would identify, maybe to implement these alternative livelihoods, then we would have to have a plan where we monitor, to provide that support, because one would argue that there's a need for communities to be independent and be able to monitor, their own community projects, which I truly also believe. But because communities haven't been, empowered to do that, maybe there's then a need to work with the communities for a longer journey, in empowering them, in ensuring that they are secure enough to, believe that they could monitor and run their own community projects until a time where assessment shows that they could stand on their own. It mustn't, the time period of being there, in most cases, is determined by the funding, and that shouldn't be the case. But the assessment of the ability of the community should also be a factor when implementing alternative livelihoods in projects to reduce pressure in protected areas. Ensuring success of alternative livelihood would include, before planning and implementing alternative livelihood projects, the main threat to the protected areas need to be identified. So this is where the starting point is, and it's important to note that different protected areas would have different livelihood options, okay, or rather different communities would have different need of different livelihood options. So it's very critical that in the implementation of alternative livelihoods, we don't copy and paste different alternative projects that have been implemented, but we need to do an assessment firstly from internally as a protected area of what are the pressures that are coming from the communities, and then go on the community to understand who is this community, what is in the community, and then try to marry the two to come up with suitable alternative livelihoods that will benefit the two parties. Because of time, I'm just going to touch base now going forward, but community involvement, as I've mentioned before, is very critical. You cannot move forward if the community is not sold or in a position of understanding the need and why it's important to conduct, or rather to implement, those alternative livelihoods. So the success of also implementation of alternative livelihood is largely reliant on partners, especially if you're going to implement it from a conservation agency point of view. You don't have the resources. Some of the things are even outside of our mandate to implement. So then it becomes important to grab in the different partners and NGOs, municipalities, governments, to implement these alternative livelihoods within the different communities that are within adjacent protected areas. Funding, I've spoke about funding. There's a need of funding to be very flexible, so that the funding should, it's not that the funding, the issues should speak to the funding. It's not funding speaking to the issue. So there needs to be flexibility of funding, and there needs to be a lot of training and workshop. People need to be empowered, and people need to get to a stage where they feel confident in engaging. So a lot of engagement of training and empowering people is important. And then, as I've touched on, monitoring, the need to monitor if, like, why you started. Are you still serving the point of why you started? Is it contributing a particular, for at the standpoint of a conservation agency is contributing to biodiversity conservation, and then from a point of communities, addressing the social economic of the communities. And then, just to conclude, I know I'm way out of time. Some of the livelihood projects that were implemented contributing to reducing pressure inside protected area. However, few of the alternative activities did not make any significant changes, mainly because implemented projects were small, so many community members did not benefit. I've already touched on this, that there's a need to have a dominant scale when implementing alternative livelihood, so that more people could dominate the less people who don't have, just like democracy. That's how it works, and that's the approach that should be taken when you are introducing alternative livelihood. So from the assessment of the study, it is highly recommended that Ezemvelo does go on a journey of implementing alternative livelihoods projects. It will definitely build relationships with communities, and it would assist with the level of socioeconomic issues that are pressing issue, to the management of protected areas. And with that, thank you so much. I would like to acknowledge Nonhle Mngadi, who works as an intern and within our social ecology unit, who was the one who collected the raw data online of the different case studies. Thank you so much.